Episode 7 of Jujutsu Kaisen is probably the most reacted episodes of anime on YouTube. Just go look it up. There's literally hundreds of videos reacting to that episode with millions of views, so clearly there's an interest in not only from a reactor's point of view, but also the fans wanting to see the reaction of this iconic episode, hence why the view count on these videos are so high. But why is this episode specifically the one that creates such a buzz in the anime community? Well, the obvious answer is of course the reveal of Gojo's eyes. Whilst that is the obvious answer, you can't deny it being a massive factor, as it's almost unanimous within the anime community that seeing Gojo's eyes so early on in the story was such a shock, but a positive one, as it's usually a shonen cliche seeing such a massive reveal to be saved for the endgame of the story. But in Jujutsu Kaisen, we got it straight away as the story is starting to pull itself together. But other than the eye reveal, there are other aspects of this episode which made it so iconic and game-changing for the series. For starters, we see a special grade unregistered curse fighting off against the most powerful sorcerer in the world. Now granted, Jogo is getting obliterated by Gojo, but this sets the bar for us fans. Gojo ends up getting Yuji involved for him to see what domain expansions are, but I feel like Yuji was there mainly to see what an actual threat these special grade curses are. Gojo even says to Yuji that he wants Yuji and the rest of the students to end up defeating a special grade curse on the level of Jogo. Yuji is of course overwhelmed, but I need to emphasize this. Jogo is not weak. It's just Gojo is that strong. This episode sets out the level that Yuji and the others will have to eventually reach in order to fight these special grade curses. It reminds me so much of the Baratie arc in One Piece when we get introduced to the strongest swordsman in the world, Dracula Mihawk, and he demonstrates the power gap between himself and one of the main characters of the story, Roronoa Zoro, whose dream is to be the strongest swordsman in the world. But in that arc, we got to see how much stronger the world is and the journey and power-ups that Luffy and Zoro will need to reach in order to compete against these monsters. This is the exact same scenario here. Yuji is seeing two beasts fighting it out, both at the pinnacle of sorcerer and cursed demon strength. This laid out the foundation of Yuji's journey to eventually be as strong as them. Another big factor on why this episode shocked the world is the explanation and the true introduction of domain expansions. Domain expansions is a game changer for the series. It enhances the stakes and it allows Akutami to show off his creative side in all the unique domain expansions such as Malevolent Shrine and the famous Idol Death Gamble, which is saved for a later arc. Seeing a domain expansion and knowing the stakes that will be involved once one has been unleashed makes it so much more gripping for us the audience. This is basically the one-shot kill move. When you unleash your domain expansion, you expect to win. It's you showing all your cards and making your opponent fold. Jogo unleashed his Coffin of the Iron Mountain, which will incinerate anyone that enters it, but he's up against Gojo, who unleashes his own domain expansion, Infinity Void, which gives his opponent an unlimited amount of information until they basically have their heads exploded because of the over-information. Gojo explains to Yuji and us on how domain expansions work. They are a guaranteed hit. You can potentially escape a domain expansion even though that is extremely hard to do, or you can overpower the user with your own domain expansion, just like how Gojo did in this scenario. It's not only a physical battle between the two fighters, but it's also a psychological one, making the one trapped in the domain think on their feet even more. There's a certain criminal lawyer that has his own domain expansion in the Culling Games arc, which demonstrates the psychological battle between two fighters perfectly. I'm not gonna spoil that, as that is an excellent fight and you deserve to appreciate that moment for yourself if you haven't read those chapters. By the end of the episode, we see the introduction of Mahito, Yuji's arch rival going forward. This is another big moment in this episode. The amount of damage Mahito does to Yuji, both physically and mentally, is actually unreal. He is the Joker to Yuji's Batman. Even Sukuna gets fed up with Mahito at one point in the arc, so this is a big deal revealing him in the very episode that shocked the entire internet and cemented Jujutsu Kaisen's status as a big shonen title. The final part of the episode is the foreshadowing for the October 31st Shibuya incident. This is a massive foreshadowing, as that arc, the Shibuya Incident Arc, is one of the greatest in shonen history. Can't emphasize that enough. When the anime eventually drops season 2, and if they animate the Shibuya Incident Arc, I'm telling you guys now, Jujutsu Kaisen's popularity will skyrocket even more. And it all started with this episode. This is the episode that sets everything in motion for future story events, for future great villains, for future clashes regarding the domain expansions, as well as the power level ceiling for our main group of characters to reach in order to fight against the special grade curses. I think it's a great episode, guys. Seriously, it's one of those episodes that gets you from liking a series into loving a series. Before this episode, I enjoyed Jujutsu Kaisen, but after this episode, I got hyped for Jujutsu Kaisen. I want to know more about the villains and more about Gojo and the history of sorcerers, as well as Sukuna. One Piece fans will get this. It was the walk to Arlong Park moment for me, this episode. But enough from me. What did you guys think? Do you think this episode put Jujutsu Kaisen on the map? And what are your opinions in general on why this episode is so popular? Comment below and let me know. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Shaman Tribe.